Hello humans. Hello humans. Today is the 14th of November. I always do that. Anyway. Okay, got to talk about some flavor. And okay, so it's going to be complex. It's basically making an analogy to woo stuff because of where we're at in the overwoo and what's happening with the narrative, the official narrative, and so on. So, okay, so human beings have 7 senses. All right, so let's look at this. So, pineal gland, which is actually an eye inside the middle of your head that receives biophotons generated by your body. And that's a complete subsystem. You have your eyes, your ears for sound. You have taste and smell. Now we also know that we have touch and temperature as complete subsystems as well. So we've got 7 senses here. Now the one we're going to talk about today is next to the nose, arguably the most meaningful but also subtle of all of the senses. Okay, so boy, this is very complex. Totally. We don't. All right. So all of these senses here. We're going to talk about taste today and flavors. But all of these senses are entire subsystems. So you don't see light. You see an image decoded by your eyes and the visual cortex of your brain, and swapped over, and it's tied to the back part of your brain in the back part of your skull. The eyes decode light for you. You don't have to think about, okay, now I'm seeing a yellow light, now I'm seeing a green light, and I'm going to put them together and make blue out of it, right? You don't have to do that. Your eyes do that for you. Your eyes and your brain coordinate the shapes you see, all of this kind of stuff. Thus, you can get your brain all fucked up and your eyes go wonky, right? Or you get your eyes all screwed up and your brain gets wonky because they're so connected there at the visual cortex. So that is a complete subsystem. It presents you an accomplished fact, okay? The fact of seeing, the fact of that image. So it does not present you with seeing. We call it that. Our words about our senses are very confused because of the nature of what we're actually experiencing with them, right? Because we're experiencing a transformation. Once again, this is about the woo, it's about the magic, it's about the transformational processes that are involved in being human. Very deep transformational processes, very deep initiation processes, because you get initiated through your senses. So in other words, no human on earth was ever initiated in their butt cheeks. There's no initiation method anywhere, no form of meditation, nothing that involves your butt cheeks that will get you initiated into a secret school or into enlightenment or onto a new path, right? The only way you get initiated into anything is through your sensory subsystems. Now, so a point of a lot of the initiation ceremonies is the distortion, deliberate distortion of your subsystems such that your brain gets wonky and you achieve these new insights into consciousness. We'll just leave it at that for the moment. Anyway, so all of these subsystems provide you with a complete experience. The complete experience is composed internally of sensory input that comes from outside our heads, theoretically, or outside of the subsystem itself, theoretically. We have no real way of validating that because we use our subsystems to validate all of the universe. They could be entirely illusionary and we would never know. But in any event, though, so we have these subsystems. We think with them, using them, we analyze nature and so on. Now, these subsystems provide us complete and complex experience. The experience we want to talk about today is related. It's called flavor. Okay, that's one of the. We call it taste as well, but it's actually this. We also use that word for the sensation of acquiring flavor. You taste a flavor, but a flavor is also a taste. So you can have a taste for something, and so our language, as I say, becomes necessarily confused about these things because we don't think about them. We're not taught about them in a systematic, technical way, really. Okay, so that's what we have to analyze, and that's what we have to discuss today: is a technical aspect of the woo, a technical aspect of ourselves in the woo. All right, and this is that we function entirely through these subsets. If we were computer programs, these would be subroutines. Complex subroutines that all came back to a single point that attached in a stack fashion to our OS and provided the OS the necessary information and so on for it to do its job. All right, so now what I'm about to say about flavor and taste can be applied to any of these other senses and will be applied that way by many of you that are watching this because you are not taste oriented over the others. So we find that some humans are what we call foodies, right? Some people are really into aroma. Those are the people that are always, buying shit and putting aromatherapy stuff in their house and all of that kind of stuff. They can't help it, right? In their current iteration, at this current time, their karma has directed that their smell, and the impact of that smell on their system is the predominant subsystem that is occupying their attention and their consciousness at this point. For some people, it may go through their whole lives. Like I know this guy that's in the perfume business, and he's been that way ever since a kid. I mean, let me see. He's a little bit older than me, so maybe he was 16 when I was like 14, right? And met him. Okay, so, but even at when I very first met him, like within that first week, I knew this guy was nose directed. He was just like my dog, right? That smells really lit his fire. And he ended up being a top dog, in the perfume business, all right? So there's all of these kinds of dominance within the sensory apparatus. It floats, so at times in your life you're going to find that your eyes are dominant. You're visually oriented. Other times it'll be sound. We all know that audiophiles, right? That have to have that last little tweak in their sound system, and you can't even tell from four iterations of their process back. You can't tell any difference from there. And these guys are swearing, and they're saying, "Don't you hear the difference? Wow!" I know a bunch of guys like that, and it's like, no, I'm sorry, guy, I just don't. It doesn't tweak my weasel, right? Anyway, so. And then you'll see people that, especially men, that, are visually oriented, right? Visually oriented. And so all of these, so you can find people that are dominated by any of these subsystems, right? Now, here's the thing. In each and every one of these subsystems, as in the woo itself, there's this concept that we can apply the word flavor to. It needs to have a much more robust description and descriptives applied to it, and it needs to be really investigated because there is something there. And we'll get into something really weird shit here in a minute, right? But there's something solid there. And so but I'm just going to use the word flavor. But so I can say that you can have a flavor in a smell, you can have a flavor of a woman, a certain type of woman that visually excites you, that kind of thing. There's a flavor in sound, like, you're not into rockabilly, but you love, jazz or something, right? So there are flavors of all of these things. And so these flavor can be a very descriptive word for all of our subsets because it implies a favor as well, right? So you favor favor a particular flavor of anything. So just talking about taste now, we get to this idea that specific flavors trigger a response in us that we can put the word favor to. I favor this, or it is my favorite, favorite. I desire this, right? That's basically what it is. I enjoy the flavor that I favor. I crave that favor, and crave the flavor to create that favor because of the sensation of that flavor in my taste subsystem. Okay, so at the point that I'm craving that, I'm allowing my mind to allow, my mind is allowing the tongue to dominate my attention, dominate my whole body when, like, I've got a chocolate craving or something, right? And so, and you see this with women, and here's the whole, when they're pregnant, all right? And this is the whole point, to bring this back to the biology here in the woo. Universe gave us all of these subsystems deliberately. It gave us flavors and favor out of flavors deliberately, all right? With specificity to cause certain things to occur at vast quantities of levels. This is a design pattern within the woo, within universe, that is replicated throughout all of our subsystems. It's replicated throughout all of our bodies, through our consciousness and everything. We as above, so below. This design pattern permeates all of universe. And the design pattern goes something like this, all right? That there are points in universe that develop complexity that we find pleasing. We find these complexities pleasing because of their effects on our subsystems. So in the case of an audiophile, he finds the Ode to Joy pleasing when he hears it played, and many of them will just weep uncontrollably, right? And because of the nature of that music, it is altering, it is transforming their body. They are experiencing something different through transformation because that subsystem excuse me, has taken over their attention and is directing their entire consciousness, and that is allowing certain responses from that subsystem, that subsystem triggers in the brain to connect to nerves 7, 9, and 10 in the vagus structure and flood the body with hormones. So when you come across a situation, and so we have flavors, by the way, that extend to large social gatherings. So you will find yourself in a situation, most people might, where they are within a large collective, and in a positive way, they have a large group, a concert or something, or a football game, and so now the fuck Joe Biden thing, right? That causes people to have a very specific response to a social flavor, to an aggregation point. Okay, so here's the thing about flavors. We have small sensors in our tongues. We have small sensors in the back of our throat. We have small sensors in our sinuses. We have small sensors all throughout our nasal passages that are tied to the tongue. So the tongue has a nerve complex that joins into the cranial nerves and is able to cause this backfeed, so to speak, through the primary nerves in your brain that go to the vagus nerve and cause hormone response in the body. These tiny sensors in your tongue are specific to individual flavor elements, okay? So they're just a little dip in your tongue, and the little flavor element comes on in, and it excites it comes in here, and the thing reacts to it. The sensor reacts to it, and it sends off a burst of happiness, just basically a little electrical burst through a nerve pattern, and it gets to your head. Some people's tongues are so sensitive and dogs are specifically like this because the snout is involved, and they have 20,000 times more sensors than we do at the back of the throat and in the sinus. So they're very much more sensitive to flavor, right? Something we don't really give them credit for. But their liking of flavor is different. Anyway, though, so some people are so sensitive that a single flavor element, a flavonoid, can trigger this, all right? So now a flavonoid is an unusual thing that we find developing in universe naturally. And basically, let's say that we had a chemical compound that that was structured in a particular way, and it, how do I describe this? Okay, so we find that there's very little difference between sugar, oils, fats. All of these react, all of our tongue has reacting points, it has sensors for all of these guys. Chemically, you can go from a sugar to an oil to a fat, fat to a sugar, oil to a fat, you know, back and forth, with just minimal changes in a few of the elementals within that particular substance. Now, these elementals, the compounds that we are dealing with here, can become more complex and have become more complex in universe. So there's no real reason that humans, okay, so let me see. Universe uses taste to drive animals to seek specific health-giving, health-sustaining material. So you don't find, for instance, cows being driven to eat cactus, right? They're not driven to eat sand, right? They want to eat grass because there's a response in their body to grass. Humans have those kind of responses, but we have a plethora of them, a vast quantity of them. And it depends on all kinds of things going on within the human body because our vagus nervous system is ever so much more complex than that of a cow. And this is where all of this stuff is resonant, is within the vagus nervous system. Which is outside our spine. It's not inside our spine, right? And so this is the most complex nervous system that we have on this planet, perhaps only exceeded or equaled, not exceeded, but only equaled by the vagus nervous system in dolphins and whales. Anyway, though, so here we are developing in universe, and universe decides that it needs to motivate us as well as all other animals. And so it decides to use flavors and pleasing sounds, pleasing sights, all of these things as attention triggers to get us to do shit, right? Just like the sight of a warm living human motivates the zombie to go and chase it, that sort of thing, right? He can't help it. That's what universe wanted, was something that would trigger our survival elements when we need it in specific ways, and that's the flavonoids. So if you get ill, and you were to, for instance, even get COVID, you will find that if you take elderberry syrup and you mix it in with a little tiny bit of hot water and you put in vitamin C in that little drink of elderberry syrup, and when you put that on your tongue, even as you are ill, especially as you are ill, and in no it will not affect you the same way when you're not ill, your body will respond to that elderberry syrup because of the complex oils and other chemicals within it. It will have a flavor that will attract your favor in a way that is not present when you're not ill. And this is keyed into universe. It wants you to transform yourself from somebody suffering the disease, suffering an attack by a disease, to somebody that is well, and it provides you with this complex, very, very, very complex flavonoid to trigger this response in your tongue such that you will crave it and you will take it, because that flavonoid is exactly what you need to overcome that disease at that time. And so the same thing is true of chaga. It's filled with terpenes, terpenols, all different kinds of things, vitamins, all these extremely complex triggering molecules that are just massively huge that still yet fit within our receptors, or parts of them do, and it causes these receptors to say, wow, I want some more of that, right? And so that's flavor. That's flavor in universe. It is very, very, very complex. pregnant women need those flavonoids to guide them to the biological elements to the chemical elements that their biology needs to complete its task of growing out another human, which is 180,000 calories over its process. And that's not all 180,000 calories of McDonald's or tortillas or something like that, right? They need specific chemicals at specific times in order to provide what their body needs to make that new human. And so the flavonoids drive them. This is the point of those cravings. You'll also find that cravings hit kids when they're ill. This is why we have specific needs for fats, like in chicken soup, in particular things when you're ill, and so on, right? The flavonoids should guide. And so if I've got a dog that is ill, I can tell that by what I offer. I can tell what kind of an illness that dog has by what I offer it to eat and what it accepts and rejects, because it's so keyed in, and it will not trick itself and take ice cream when it really shouldn't have take the ice cream, right? And so usually there are some dogs that are, just like humans. There's a wide variation. Anyway, though, but in general, you can find the flavonoids that will affect the human, and over time we see and we accumulate all this flavonoid knowledge in our apothecary, our knowledge base of plants and their interaction, or substances and their interactions with our biology and the biology of animals and even other plants, right? So our apothecary is basically a collection of flavors. Now, flavonoids can be extremely complex, long chain molecules, all different kinds of things. So I got really into this when I was inventing this pure sleep stuff, right? Because there's a substance in here called GABA, which is what produces, or what allows your body, because your body produces it. All right, so first off, you can take nothing in your body that will affect you that does not already exist in your body other than poisons. So I could take arsenic and it would affect me, and I would keel over. But I couldn't eat sand and be affected by it. You have to have these chemicals and receptors in your body in order for the chemicals to work, right? And so the universe has the biology be the penultimate guide for that. So when I was doing this, I came across this substance called GABA that allows the body to produce the maximum level of human growth hormone overnight. This is when the body produces human growth hormone. It's ever so complex to get into this stuff, right? But I was healing myself from the cancer, and had to. It was terrible. I was just annoyed. I wanted to do magnets and spaceship kind of stuff and fun stuff. But in any event, so I had to get in all this medical crap. So the human body needs human growth hormone to be produced every night in order to recover. Mostly when people are dying, they're unable to produce any kind of human growth hormone, and their body just goes down real quick. This is the point where they're sleeping all the time because their body is desperate. And this is one of the things about dying, that even if you're ill, other than a quick, violent, brutal death, a gradual death will always involve basically sleeping yourself away, because what's happening is your body is throwing you into a state of sleep in an attempt to get your body into that phase for recovery. So we have metabolism, but we also have, okay, so let me back up. All right, so the only time our bodies can repair is at night, when we're basically immobile. We're not up doing stuff. We're not putting extra pressure on our joints and our muscles and so forth. So when you walk and you impact, if you're just usually it's 1.5 times your body weight when you just do a standard walk. In order to grow and get stuff to happen with your bones, you got to hit at twice your body weight in order to cause that shock that causes the bones to get into stiffening and so on. In order for that to occur, so you do a bunch of jumping jacks during the first part of the morning, you're not building your body at all. The effect of jumping up and down and causing those impacts to your bones will not be felt until that night. At that time, the body will say, oh, that bastard's probably going to do that shit tomorrow morning. I'd better make these bones a bit stiffer. And so it will cause flavonoids that are drivers to cause you to get more calcium, to want to drink milk, to want to eat yogurt, to want to gnaw on bones because you're going to need fats and this kind of stuff to help build your bones. And so it'll start triggering flavonoids so that the next morning you have this desire before or after your jumping jacks that you start eating the things that will be necessary for the body to repair itself and to guard against the stupid shit you're doing to it, right? That from its perspective. And so you get into this habit of doing exercise. The body starts giving you the flavonoid desires. It starts triggering these guys here when they're empty to go, give me some of that, right? And so you crave taste, and it percolates through the taste sensor up into your brain, and you get this complete thing saying, I gotta have me something, and some image comes to mind of a particular kind of a food that your body knows contains those things that it needs. And so you go off and you get it. Okay, so these flavonoids are extremely complex things. As I say, they can just be massive molecules. Okay, so we find these. All right, so now we sort of understand the function of flavonoids and one partial aspect of how they work here in our reality. So for instance, the flavonoid that is used as the catalyst and the trigger because flavonoids are also trigger molecules, all right? So they provide you good substance, but they also are the inducement to take the rest of the stuff in there. So there's elements in bananas that if you crave bananas that you need, but there's only very few flavonoids. They're not very, they don't really have a big, huge impact on your taste, right? So it's hard to crave something out of a banana, but you could occasionally. Easier to crave something out of a drug-inducing chemical like chocolate. Or coffee, right? Caffeine, those sorts of things, right? So you crave those because the flavonoids are easily recognized and so on, but they're also trigger molecules. So caffeine is a very powerful trigger molecule for body processes. Chocolate has theobromine in it, very powerful body chemical, causes all kinds of hormonal changes and so on. This is why women that are pregnant choose to have, they have chocolate cravings frequently, even if they didn't really like chocolate frequently, because their body needs to produce these hormonal responses. Okay, so in this, all right, no, wait, one more aspect. Flavonoids are extremely complex, and they can combine with other chemicals in such ways as to provide even more complex interaction between the nutrition of your body and the nutrition going into your body and your body's ultimate use of that nutrition. So humans crave and have always wanted to have spices and herbs. All right, not only because of their health-giving properties. We've always associated spices and herbs with a long life, longevity, getting well, healthy, curing some illness, etc. We just always have craved these. We've set up the spice trade, the spice routes, all of these things. In fact, we name trade routes after spices. They're so valuable into us. And what is a spice? It is a particular kind of a flavonoid concentrated to great degree in some form of a product, right? So now the spices, the flavonoids, are also trigger molecules in the sense that they can be catalyzed. Okay, they can provide many catalyst actions to other materials that you're going to ingest. So you can put spices on meat, especially in times of the winter where it's very heavy and winter, the weather's damaging your body every day and so on. And your body needs a lot of repair. You'll crave things that have carnitine in them because it does a lot of the same stuff that GABA does in terms of increasing the human growth hormone. And these spices will be triggered in your tongue, the craving for them, the smell for them, because spices or the flavonoids are also triggering the sense of smell to draw you to them. That's how you find them out in nature, that sort of thing. All of these things are catalysts to other activities in your body. So you have catalytic reactions going on in your body all the time. The grosser ones are the only ones you're going to be aware of. And so, feeling good from having a big bowl of chocolate ice cream, right? Or some other comfort food that has lots of fats in it and potentially has sugars. These are flavonoid reactions that trigger a gross hormone response that you're able to feel and notice, like eating turkey, getting tryptophan, and going to sleep, right? Tryptophan is also, although it's an amino acid, tryptophan is also a flavonoid. It has a small amount of a flavonoid. It's not a very powerful one. In pure sleep, I use nutmeg. Okay, nutmeg has it's an extremely complex flavonoid base. All right, I don't want to get into the details about flavonoids, but we'll just think of them as a whole thing instead of these much more complex. We won't break them down any finer. But nutmeg is a excellent triggering flavonoid. It has the potential to activate, to be a catalyst for a great many hormonal reactions in humans. All of these spices that do this will have some level of the planet that has no effect from them, and some level, a smaller amount, that will have a negative effect. So there's some people that they just can't stand the taste of pure sleep, and they can't, it's just because they can't deal with the nutmeg. Their body says, nope, you don't need that, stay away from it. There's about 8% of the population that doesn't really get that much out of it, okay? So basically about 10% of all people will find my product to be unsatisfactory. I know this going in. This is kind of the spread, this 1 to 2% that just don't want it, and then about 8% that has no real effect, is about the spread of any of these spices, any of these spice molecules that are these highly complex groups of flavonoids. So nutmeg is not simply one flavonoid, it is thousands. Same thing with anise, many of these others that are seeds, okay, aromatic oil-bearing seeds usually are the ones, star seed, that kind of thing, right? That produce these complex catalytic flavonoids. Shit, okay, this could be a long one. Anyway, so our flavonoids are a deliberate creation of universe. Like, this was not fucking accident, right? We need these things. Universe has to provide them. They're very, very, very powerful to us. Nutmeg triggers human growth hormone like you wouldn't believe. Humans have been using nutmeg as a sleep aid in various parts of the planet in various formula for perhaps 6,000 years. I found evidence for at least 4,000 years of nutmeg being transported from the tropics up into the Siberian regions when I was investigating chaga. The reason is that in Siberia, it's permafrost, and so you can't bury people. There's no trees to speak of that you can really easily get as natives. You know, you don't have mechanization and so on. It's frequently frozen or mud, and so they don't, they're not able to dig holes in the permafrost to bury people, and they can't burn them. And so what they do is they find, there's these pits, these natural huge lake kind of things that form in the permafrost, which is basically a swamp that's frozen, but some areas of it stay a little bit warmer, and they pitch they wrap up the dead people lovingly and everything, but they pitch them into these pits, and they settle down to the bottom, and they basically get mummified by all the mud. And they put things with them that were their treasures in life. So we found mummies with sacks of bud, decent looking bud too, mummified in the bottom of these Siberian funerary wells, right? And we found them with whole nutmeg that had been rubbed on a rock, so you could see that part of it was grated off. And nutmeg has a particular affinity for like many of the highly aromatic oils, for curing mouth problems. And so the person that, in this archaeological study, the person that they found this nutmeg with they had been suffering from mouth cancer and was using the nutmeg to treat some form of the mouth cancer. I don't remember if they got into the details of what kind of mouth cancer it was. Okay, so now we understand flavonoids. Now we understand that flavonoids drive us. They're a control mechanism from universe. Because we become aware of, as you become aware of a mechanism, you can then start to exploit it. This is the idea that any system left in place long enough can be gamed by humans. And so we, as a species, we've gamed flavonoids. And so we create ice cream companies and we create sugar companies that produce pop and all these other things, right? Just to play off of and make their money catering to our need for these flavonoids. And then they accentuate and exaggerate that feeling to create a drive, and then they suck all your money and pollute you by getting you addicted to it and supplying it, right? Whatever it is, whatever your attention gets hooked on. Okay, so now the point of all of this was to bring up this idea that flavonoids exist not only in universe to provide substance and direction for our bodies to heal themselves and seek and so on, right? So flavonoids are used in animals to cause migrations to occur. As certain plants die off, certain other ones get to moving in other regions, and so animals will be motivated to migrate by flavonoids. They'll know it's time when they get a flavonoid craving, and birds, for instance, and certain phase changes occur in the light, and so they'll do migrations. Until there's a certain weighted combination of both of them, they won't move. So they're driven by this, not just the phase change of the light, but the fact that they've got the flavonoid change. So at some point, the birds stop craving a particular, shorebirds stop craving a particular kind of fish, and they go change their diet and work on insects, that sort of thing. Anyway, so large movements in our reality are triggered by flavonoids. Now, we can extend this concept, and I do not have a word for it, so I use the word of it's a flavor of the woo. It's a flavonoid out in the woo, right? But we have, at a larger level, flavonoids that are directing our whole social order. And they are complex points within the woo, within our reality, within the ether, that for whatever reason are structured and created by universe, okay? And they become very, very, very complex, and they motivate us, they drive us in spite of denials, in spite of aversion, in spite of all different kinds of things. They still nonetheless cause the whole social order, all of humanity, to be motivated and to change. And so you'll instantly recognize hopefully, you'll instantly recognize what I'm talking about when I put up 4 little marks on the thing, 4 little graphenes here, right? And you'll see these marks and you'll start cluing in to what I'm talking about, I think. And so, 1947. All right, so small diversion. For humans, distance equals time, all right? So D equals T. So we can say right now deliberately that 1947 is a temporal marker for a place that Earth was back some number of years back, right? So we can say that the delta, the time difference between 1947 and now could also be measured as a distance difference between where the sun was then and where the sun is now. This is not to say that if we were to move the sun back to the position where it was in 1947, that we could recreate events. This is not like Star Trek going around the sun in reverse really fast and going back in time. No, not that kind of shit. But what I want to point out is that distance and time are essentially the same thing for humans. This is true for us. So I know that no matter what, if I want to get in over to my kitchen, time will be involved in order to accomplish that distance. So it comes down to the absolute minutia levels. But I'm saying that 1947 is a flavonoid. It's a woo flavor, right? In 1947, we get all kinds of weird shit happening. So just like a regular flavonoid starts with a particular kind of a molecule on which other molecules agglutarate, glom, join, get connected by chemical electron bonds until you get a complex structure capable of triggering the catalytic responses and driving the body through this very complex transformational process. Transformational, let's keep this in mind, initiatory. So in 1947, universe started building a flavonoid around things for humanity to motivate us. Of course, we know that there was the creation of the flying saucers. First use in around 1940, it was in 1947 up here around Mount Rainier, this pilot saw these 7 flying saucers, right? Okay, so in 1947, we get some weird shit happening. We see that this is a flavonoid because humanity responds to this as a flavonoid in a broad sense, as though we were a single organism responding to a smell or to a taste, you know. And so, for instance, I've had this experience. Kansas, dry, hot, middle of the damn summer, sun's beating down on you, and there's this sort of like dry dirt smell. All you can smell is dry dirt. You can't even smell the dust coming off of corn or anything. It's just this dry dirt smell. And then all of a sudden, there's just a little tweak in the back of your tongue. And then you start sniffing a bit, and you get this sort of sweet, darkish, apple pie, okay? So the flavor, the flavonoid from that apple pie is wafting literally, actually, a quarter of a mile or more from where it's sitting in a window, cooling, all the way over to you, where you are out in this big field of dry stuff. And your senses are 100% saturated with this one particular overwhelming smell, yet that little tiny flavonoid wafts its way through, and you get just one little tiny molecule back there, maybe 2 or 3, and got your attention, right? So your human attention trigger is taken over by that flavonoid. We had that happen here. 1947, we got UFOs, and we also get the CIA. We also get the freeing and the open creation of the Tavistock Institute. We also get which brought in MI5 and 6 in Britain. We also get the GRU subunit of the KGB set up, okay? They were devoted to UFOs. And so all of these things had UFO flavonoid trigger them. The CIA grew from an absorption of the Overseas Secret Service from World War II. And it took some people, but not all of them, right? And so there was this, well, I won't get diverted at this point. Okay, so in 1947, we have the beginning of this flavonoid. This creation. Now, that flavonoid is still driving us today. We're still having UFO encounters today. Universe is still providing these drivers for us to respond to, and it is increasing them both in numeracy and complexity. Our sightings are ever so much more complex now because we have ever so much more gear and all that. We've had the supposed crashes, you know, that we can't validate, but they're so inculcated into society that we all think it's factual. Anyway, so all of these things occur in 1947. In the medical part of it, also in 1947, we get the beginnings of the forms of organizations that will lead us down this vaccine trail. And so in the 1950s, late 40s and 50s, we have the polio epidemic that leads us to Salk coming on out and pulling a Fauci. At the very end of the epidemic, he introduces a vaccine that causes paralysis and death and all of this kind of stuff that they blame on the polio, not his vaccine, and then he claims that he cured polio with the vaccine. That occurred in 1918 as well. So in 1917, the precursors to the Tavistock Institute did 3 things. The same people that created the Tavistock Institute in 1947 were running a bunch of organizations in 1917, well, I mean, at least since 1871, in Britain, in the UK, what we now know as the UK, right? But 1917, they create the psychiatry by pimping Freud and getting into league with him. They also create the whole vaccine industry, and they create the vaccine that killed the people in the 1918 Spanish flu, right? They brought out a vaccine that killed people. It made them susceptible to double pneumonia in a huge way, and they all perished. That same disease of the Spanish flu was easily defeated by people with adequate vitamin D and people that used vitamin D effectively, which was actually, it had been earlier discovered here in the 1904 or 05, let's just put it down as 05, as the precursor molecule, and we had it by that time. But between 1917 and 1923, all of the deaths in the pandemic of the Spanish flu were basically related to the introduction of these vaccines and the problems that they caused. Once again, introducing a vaccine into the population during the pandemic. Plus, a lot of these individuals that died, insofar as on the western side of the disease, on the USA side in Europe, had been damaged by the war in mustard gas and all of these attacks that destroyed their lungs. So it's a weird kind of a time. So they did psychology and they did vaccines here, and these guys also did, as an aspect of psychology, they were also doing things about eugenics, inheritance, all of that sort of thing. I hate using the term DNA. That we take that DNA as being an inheritance thing. It's not. It relates to our epigenetics, not our genes, right? So our genes don't do what Crick and Watson think that they do, but nonetheless, we can just use that term. So these guys got into DNA, and what we can think of as eugenics at that time, trying to decide who should live and who should die in order to guide the species. So we were going to do to ourselves what we were doing to horses, cows, pigs, dogs, etc., or chickens, all of that kind of thing. Back then, all right. So, but we still had this UFO thing occurring, but these guys were reacting to something that had occurred in 1890. This was the UFO wave in 1890. So that was another flavonoid. That was an early flavonoid. And it motivated us, but it didn't motivate us the way that things did in 1947. That we are aware of, all right? So we don't have the history of it there. In 1947, we get all of these organizations forming. We were attacking this. We were dealing with it as a social order, not in denial, not in claiming it was demons or something at a religious level, but at a mechanistic level. We were exploring to see what the fuck this flavonoid was, this element of the flavonoid that was triggering us, which was the UFOs. And we started off on this entire process, which brings us up to today. More UFOs, more medical stuff being screwed around. 1947 through let's just say 1960s. That was polio epidemic. This was Spanish flu up here. In polio epidemic, we have Salk bringing out the vaccine at the very tail end of the he brought it out like right here of the epidemic, and so it was mostly over anyway. He killed a bunch of people and then claimed success, just like they're now doing with Fauci and his fucking shit, right? So all of these things are all still built in episodic conjunction with these UFO things, because we've got this new flurry of UFO stuff that started off in 2016 and is continuing to this day. These are woo flavors. These are flavonoids that are constructing themselves in the woo in universe that we should be motivated to do something. Now, I can't tell us what we're supposed to, I can't say specifically what we're supposed to do as a result of these flavonoids, but I do know that they motivate me and motivate lots of other people. And many millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, perhaps a billion people might think about UFOs frequently because they're triggered by this flavonoid out there in universe. Now, this flavonoid is becoming more complex. So nutmeg is an extremely complex flavonoid. It is one of the perhaps 5% of flavonoids in its complexity. The aromatic oils and so on in nutmeg are just like star anise, and some of these others are just, there's, in my mind, the existence and the structure of that particular set of molecules, that compound, suggest intelligent, not attention necessarily, but a design pattern that I know is replicated throughout the rest of the universe. So I take from nutmeg and the way it grew over time and the way that that plant matured. So let me divert for a second, okay? Pineapples are grapes. Did you know that? A pineapple, you know, like a big thing from Hawaii, this big spiky little critter with the spiky thing on the top, and you got to get rid of that hard sort of stuff on the outside that can hurt your fingers. But then you get into it, and it's all this nice yellow stuff, right? But if you look at it, it's all these little nice yellow things that are all smushed together, and there appear to be little thin membranes that separate little tiny intersections, and then they form into larger sections. And so what you are actually eating in a pineapple is the evolution of that pineapple from a hanging kind of a, okay, so it was a, so the pineapple originally started off with a base for the fruit, and it would be like this, where it would be clusters of all of these little fruits hanging off of these central sort of stiffer elements, more fibrous elements. But this was unsatisfactory for the plant's needs, and it eventually grew all of these things into what we now see as our pineapple shape with its leaves up on the top, by making all of the fruits sort of smushed together and not providing the separation. So a pineapple is basically a collection of yellow grapes that all grew together into a more convenient package. And that's one way to think about it, right? So plants and so forth and stuff like that do evolve. The nature of complexity growing over time is what we're encountering now. So if you were to just go and find a pineapple in a field, just growing up out of the ground, you would have no idea that this thing is related to all of these other plants that are basically hanging fruit off of vines. And that complexity came to us over time, but we don't recognize that complexity, but we're still driven to the flavonoids that are inherent within that pineapple. It's loaded with all kinds of flavonoids because those flavonoids attract us to enzymes that aid our digestion and so on. So pineapples are good for your guts. They're good for all different kinds of things in you. And if you have that need, you can be driven to it by those sorts of flavonoids. So universe builds flavonoids at various different levels. And it's building flavonoids that will attract us as a species, as though we were a huge giant single body, towards some end that is related to UFOs, because it's providing them. You know, this is obvious to my mind. Now, a lot of people think I'm kind of squirrely, but to me, it seems obvious that if the UFO appears, universe wants me to see, and I see it, universe wants me to see that UFO. There's a reason for that. You know, shit doesn't happen randomly. all the stuff in your universe is 100% perfect for what it's intended at this moment, including suffering, pain, and death, and all of that kind of shit. This is a very difficult concept to get across, but it is true. So our 1947, so basically what we're living in now is, in 1890s we had the airships, and from 1947 through to 1955, we have the UFO flurry. There were UFOs in 52, 53, 54, and 55 over Washington, D.C. Now we have 2016. There were UFOs in between 55 and 2016, but I'm just jumping all of the details to get us down here. Okay, so we're looking at a series of, here we have the tic tacs, the tacs. A series of loops in building a woo flavor, building a complexity, a flavonoid within the woo, right? So we're watching sort of the evolution of these weird yellow grapes into pineapples over time, because our our Tic Tacs now and all of this stuff is ever so much more complex, ever so much more fully formed. We're getting fairly close to some point of, harvesting the flavonoid, I think, to getting some idea of why we're intended to interact with these. Now, the powers that be may know. They may have theories as to why we're dealing with this. You may have had people thinking about this shit for 50, 80 years that have come up with some really good stuff. They don't share, so we don't know. But we're going to find out here really fucking quick, is my way of thinking, right? And so, because universe provides us the flavonoids and the conditions in order that we might be motivated. Universe did not make us into slugs for a very specific reason, right? It wants us to be ambulatory out there causing problems and creating shit, because we are agents within universe for creating complexity for itself and others, and ourselves and others. And we don't recognize that mostly. But we're agents of universe in building flavonoids for itself, certainly, and for ourselves, although we're in it and don't recognize it. But maybe we're here to build flavonoids for somebody else. And so that's our woo in the flavors. Our woo is becoming more complex, and our appreciation. So now with all flavonoids, you get, as I say, you get the audiophiles, you get the people that are visually cued. For women, you might see them going to art exhibitions, some men as well. But for men, for visually keyed in men, they're probably going to be going to strip clubs, that sort of thing, right? But we get to the point where we can become connoisseurs, okay? Word going back through French into Latin. Con meaning with, and then isur meaning the sensation, right? And so you are with the sensation, you are involved in the sensation. It's a way of saying you are beside yourself. So when you're beside yourself with worry, you're so worried in your mind that your body, you basically left, your mind has left its capacity to deal with your body in an effective way, and it's sort of outside of itself, right? I'm beside myself with worry. That sort of thing, right? So if you are a connoisseur, you can become so engrossed in that experience of that bioflavonoid that you can exclude, your attention can exclude everything else. And the connoisseur becomes, in essence, a master of their own body in that particular, all right? They may not be aware that they're attempting to achieve mastery, and that's the only thing that keeps them from understanding. The understanding that they are a master keeps them from becoming a master, if that makes sense, right? So as long as they're in the narrow tunnel of simply responding to the flavonoid, and they don't look outside themselves to see themselves responding to the flavonoid, they're never going to be the master of the flavonoid. But my friend, who is the snout fellow, who makes perfumes for a living, and has done very well doing that, he is a true master, because he is aware of how much the aroma and stuff affects the life, and he knows as soon as he's triggering that, and he applies his consciousness to the acquisition of yet more skills with his snout. And that makes him a master of his snout, of perfumes, of that particular flavonoid in woo that is attractant to him, right? So he's truly a smell master. And knows his body and all of that kind of stuff, right? So we are at that point now, this initiation point. And I think that part of our initiation, so this is just a guess, a hazarding a speculation, although I have some reason to do so, something that's motivating me to make this video to tell you about this, but I have some reason to suspect that we're going to get this catalytic response in ourselves from the flavonoid that is the UFOs that is being more constructed around us right now. And that this flavonoid will be involving many of us through these next few years as this develops, right? So clean your palate. If you're inclined, clean your palate and get ready for the for the flavor and the taste of it all. And, you know, my apologies it took so long, but it's a complex subject, and we didn't even really touch it. Flavonoids are so key to humans, and so few humans are really aware of them existing, and even fewer humans have a clue as to why they exist, right? Which is another another video for another time. Anyway, guys, you know, I'm going to go and get some more of my caffeinated flavonoid, and it's got chaga in it. It's my chaga coffee. Basically, I make coffee and I chuck some chaga in it. Now that we're back out of the we're out of this energetic thing that's been pursuing us for like 2 years, and the energies have faded, so I'm back to having coffee in the winter, and I just chuck chaga in it. Nothing, quarter teaspoon. So, you know, no big deal. People ask. Anyway, so back to work.